Hello and welcome everyone to a special episode of Two Girls Talk Transits, but it's just me, Maddie. I wanted to break down the eclipse cycle a little bit more just because I personally have been studying eclipses for as soon as I started getting really deep into astrology. So that was back during the Gemini Sagittarius eclipses way back in 2021, 2020. um, that's when I really got deep into transit and predictive astrology. And I think eclipses are one of the most powerful tools for laying the overarching framework and groundwork for your cycles, for your predictions. Almost like eclipses almost act like that big backdrop in the background that tells you what the predictions are going to be either building towards or releasing from. So I have been closely tracking eclipses ever since then and wanted to kind of wrap up these Aries Libra eclipses because this is the last Libra eclipse that we're getting in October. And then we have one more Aries eclipse. And I thought these eclipses were particularly important and a good one to talk about because Aries Libra is the sign that the sun is either exalted in Aries and then fallen in Libra. And similar to the eclipses that we were having in Cancer and Capricorn, where the moon was really afflicted, the sun really afflicted in these eclipses, I think makes them more potent. The Cancer Capricorn eclipses are extremely important. The Aries Libra ones are extremely important as they are cardinal signs. So it's almost like they initiate the other eclipse cycles that are about to happen. So we did just have the Pisces eclipse, and I think it's kind of fitting to wrap up what this new, fresh, debilitated eclipse cycle that we're wrapping up in Aries and Libra means, and that helps define and explain what Pisces and Virgo are going to be changing. Because Aries and Libra, just like Cancer and Capricorn, those are cardinal signs. So just like they do in general astrology and eclipses, they also initiate the start. So while these cycles are happening in these signs, it's almost like they're happening from the start of this season. So the Aries and Libras eclipses kind of started the next eclipses that we're getting in Pisces and Virgo and also in Leo and Aquarius until we get the next set of cardinal signs. So that has just been on my mind. And then it's eclipse season, so why not? All this whole cycle started with Aries and Libra eclipses in 2023, specifically April 20th, 2023. So I do recommend, if you want a better kind of podcast view, to look on the YouTube video for this podcast because I'll be sharing all the charts on there, but I'll also talk them through for audio listeners as well. So we start off this whole fresh new beginning after we had just wrapped up eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio, which I think really spoke a lot to the underchanging current of our economy and also women's rights and political rights around women. The economy very heavily relating to Taurus, but then Scorpio, as Mars is like feminine expression, is the darker side of those issues. And this is that first eclipse that we got in Aries, while the nodes were still in Taurus and Scorpio here at 4 degrees of each sign. The North Node is there at 4 degrees of Taurus. This new moon eclipse occurred on April 20th, 2023 at 29 degrees of Aries right here. So it was really close. It was intense. It was a bigger eclipse because Jupiter was also in Aries here at 23. Chiron as well at 16 degrees. Then this eclipse was also in a square to Pluto, roughly out of sign. Pluto is at 0 degrees Aquarius, but this eclipse is so close to the very, very last degrees of Aries that it was still very much intense by Pluto. And then, of course, being in Aries, this eclipse is ruled by Mars in Cancer, a water sign and a fallen placement. So this is important because as I've noticed when I was tracking eclipses that the ruler of the eclipse is very, very important in determining if this is going to be a good time or not. And with Mars in Cancer, this was not a good time. And I think this is good because we're having a lot of Mars in Cancer right now as we're speaking in 2024. So it's kind of a reflection back into that. Basically, what happened in April was a really intense redirection and beginning around individual rights. There were several mass shootings that, again, sparked a lot of issues around gun control, especially in America. And I will preference by saying this, I definitely look at eclipses in a very United States American lens because um, I'm an American. And I tend to have more understanding of those events. But also, worldwide, there's always the micro, macro effect. So you can apply this to your own country or your own area as well. But late April 2023, there was a lot of shootings, probably some of the biggest, most intense mass shootings. Um, a lot of starting going on. And this is when the Supreme Court started ruling on abortions. There was a total abortion ban ruled in Arizona, I think this time, or maybe that was next year. 6 weeks abortion bans became extremely popular during this eclipse, which is fitting because I felt like women's rights started getting attacked during the Taurus eclipses previously in 2022, 2023. And then, of course, in Aries, it's like Mars ruling this, like, sever it, completely cut it, like, completely deny those rights, completely just throw it out, move on. And it's an expansion, Jupiter here is not positive. Jupiter next to this eclipse was not a positive signification because Jupiter expands. Jupiter either expands good or bad. And here, this was a bad placement because Mars is in Cancer and Pluto was squaring it. So there was a big issue with this feeling of individualism, of the individual rights being attacked and being lost. The sun is exalted in Aries and really wants to shine. If this wasn't an eclipse, I would always say, that new moon in Aries is really about big beginnings for yourself and your individual and how you want to show up in life. But as an eclipse, it's like, how are those individual rights being attacked? How are they being dwarfed? How are they being suppressed or controlled by Plutonian and outside force? And so that was very much what was happening. There was a bunch of Supreme Court rulings on abortion, this is the biggest thing, that the Biden presidency messed up was not codifying abortion because this is when it got overturned. And there was also the banning of transgender student athletes. And then amongst all that, Biden thought it would be a great idea for him to launch his 2024 presidential bid and, claim that big individualism and independence, but then also just kind of leave our country in ruins. um, so that was sort of what was going on collectively, was this sort of realization of your individual rights sort of coming under attack, sort of suddenly being suppressed or challenged. Mars eclipses love challenges, and that's exactly what started. Now, on a personal level, you may want to think back to April of 2023 and reflect more on that period of time, especially late April going into May, how you chose to step into more of your own individual nature or power, especially wherever Aries is in your chart. For me, this is my ninth house. And this was a time that I had been really teaching astrology on the side for about 3 to 4 years up to this point, and was really wanting to be extremely intentional about my growth. So I think during this time, I was really doubting my ability to show up as a leader. The sun, although exalted in Aries, was eclipsed, and I was struggling with my belief that I could be an astrologer, that I could show up and teach this, or that I could show up just in this work, in this community as a stronger voice or as someone who is knowledgeable. And I ended up like hiring a coach at this time, spending a lot of money on building my brand And it was a very important beginning, but felt like one that was a challenge because at this time I was at a very demeaning job that was completely draining me of my life force and didn't make me feel very powerful. So it was an interesting period of time, but it sparked this new challenge beginning of finding how I want to show up as a leader and an individual in an astrological space, in that ninth house sort of belief space and teaching space as well. So that was a big kind of impediment to this work and to how I'm showing up on here. And maybe for you, that's something to reflect on, especially where that Aries placement is, where the houses are, and how you feel more grounded or how you felt more driven to show up as an individual, as sort of a leading light, as sort of a guide, although that may be or that may have been extremely challenged and hard to grasp, or you may be dealing from power structures or dynamics or beliefs that are suppressing that ability to shine. Okay. So then this sets the stage. We fast forward to the next eclipse, which happened in October 2023. This was our first Libra eclipse, also a new moon. Also, here is where that sun is going to be fallen. So, again, heavily on the individual. So, here we have this new moon eclipse in Libra on October 14th, 2023. But generally, if you're going back and looking at transits, give yourself enough space for like the whole month or like the whole, I usually use the whole month, but especially starting at that time and then maybe a month after as sort of a reflection period. So this new moon occurred at 21 degrees of Libra. Mercury is close by at 17 degrees of Libra, and the south node is right there at 24 degrees Libra. The ruler, Venus, is unfortunately back in Virgo at 5 degrees, so she's also in a fallen placement. Not an ideal eclipse, especially with that sun fallen in Libra. Mars is strong though in Scorpio, but he's in Scorpio, so it's like out of the way. This eclipse was like opposite Chiron at 17. So Mercury was opposite Chiron here. And Pluto was in about a square. Pluto's at 27 Capricorn squaring that eclipse. So again, those Plutonian themes. Loved this eclipse. And that's why I think it's so fitting with Pluto and Capricorn for this last Libra eclipse. But I stop talking about that. This started the Gaza Palestine genocide. And there's a lot to this. There is a lot to this in terms of if you want to really go deep into the Israel chart, the chart of Israel and the chart of Palestine, and how heavily they are influenced by cardinal signs, especially the sign of Libra. I think the astrology podcast, Chris Brennan, and one of his guests on there did a really good reflection of this eclipse and how the, Israel Palestine conflicts, but the literal genocide that's happening occurs under these eclipses. How tightly they are tied to Libra, I would definitely be looking to that conflict for this last eclipse just because of where that falls in their country's charts. So astrology was really popular in Arabic, especially because it did kind of start in that Mesopotamia area before we moved over to Hellenistic. There was Babylonian astrology that was going alongside of it. So those countries often do have very specifically timed birth charts. So it's actually really interesting if you want to get into that. So this definitely started that whole conflict genocide issue, which continues to impact America because of how that ties so deeply into our political issues and discussions. The abortion issues continue to be a huge discussion as well during this time. And there was a big release around data privacy as well. So, some sort of information, Mercury being in the mix, how private is your information? Or if it being in Libra, how do you share that information amongst other people or like facilitate information? Do you keep that hidden or do you keep that under wraps or so? So, that was the main kind of going on. And in conjunction to the first time we had the eclipse in the spring with Aries, this eclipse and Libra is a new moon, but it's a south node new moon. It was like, now that you started this big individual adventure, which is really those north node eclipses and Aries, what also does this mean for the community or the people that surround you? What does this mean? What kind of new adventure or beginning are you creating within your community as well, long term, due to your new individualistic pursuits? And then maybe around letting go of some things, of some past relationships. And then this one was particularly uncomfortable because the Libra eclipse really wants to be seen, but this may be this point in the eclipse cycle in October of 2023 where you realize, like, I have so much more to overcome to be that big vision for myself, or to create that goal, or to have that start. Look at this big thing that has been uncovered, and I have to start to deal with it and confront it in some sort of way. And I felt like this eclipse really addressed a lot of the issues that stand in the way of our individualism. Like, you can't just truly be your own unique factor without taking the time to see how your community is influenced, or what is a value. Being ruled by Venus, there's still things that we value that we want to bring with us forward, and maybe struggling a bit to grasp that. Libra eclipses are often they've all been, except for one, which is the one we had in 2024, all been new moons. And the Aries eclipses are all new moons. So I think that's really interesting because it speaks to, we're really trying to start fresh this cycle, but it's almost like we're starting fresh amongst all these challenges, trying to let go of all this past drama and start fresh. In Aries, we're really thinking about, wow, we got to turn America around. We have to, really address the shootings. We have to address the abortion ban. We have to address the inflation. I didn't even mention that, but like, the inflation issue from 2022 became a huge thing in 2023 under that first Aries eclipse. And then it's like, okay, we have all this we got to do. We get to the Libra eclipse, and it's like, yeah, and also there's all this collective conflict too. Collectively, this is a bigger issue as well. Now, how do you handle all of that? So it just becomes showing you the balance. I think because there was no, very few of these full moons occurring, it's constantly trying to balance between our individual expression and how that also supports collective movements. So this was the setting, these eclipses set the stage. Yeah. I think it's the best way to put it, as like the conflict within ourselves and the conflict within others, and how do we create harmony from that? And usually we won't. So then we fast forward to this year, 2024, and we start out again first with a Libra eclipse. So this is our only full moon eclipse that we get with this cycle, which again I thought was very interesting. So this eclipse occurred in March 25th of 2024, late March. This was a full moon in Libra at 5 degrees, with the moon there and the sun at 5 degrees Aries. So this eclipse, we have that exalted sun. Venus was also exalted in Pisces. She was conjunct Saturn, which is a little bit of a downer, and Mars was also in Pisces at the time, but for the most part, they were very much so, not invisible, but I felt like this eclipse was easier, a little more comfortable, a little bit more like, oh, okay, I'm understanding what I believe in regarding these societal conflicts. And I'm recognizing what's important. And it's sort of this middle ground, like, okay, I can create some ease here. And that was really a temporary kind of feeling. I felt like this eclipse was softer and easier about, okay, where can I lean onto my values and my comforts? And where can I find a little bit more compassion for others? And how do I recognize that others and the relationships in my life help build up my individual pursuits. So maybe there was this moment of feeling a little bit more supported. So there was still a lot of collective issues around this time, specifically around, like, again, abortion, but also information and ability of self-expression. Because the TikTok ban was like a huge topic around this time around self-expression and sharing information of like, well, Libra full moon, well, that is a way for me to socialize, connect with other people, and share my information. You can't let that go. Okay? And I felt like that was a big sort of speaking to how there was this moment of a little bit of ease almost, but it was quickly followed by that total solar eclipse on the 8th in Aries, this new moon. So this one is early in April. And this April 2024 was so big. So this is this new moon solar eclipse in April at 19 degrees, and this one was exactly conjunct Chiron at 19 degrees of Aries. Mercury was retrograde at 24 degrees of Aries. The North Node was there at 15 degrees Aries, and Venus was here at 15. As well, we remember this eclipse is ruled by Mars, so this was ruled by a Mars in Pisces still, who was conjunct Saturn. This was a big ouch. There was a huge, so this was the TikTok ban. This did happen during this month where it was officially said that they would have to be bought out or kind of change their data rules. And it's interesting because, like, if we remember in October, that's when the EU started really talking about the data issues with Meta. And then they turn around and flip this, like, oh, well, let's ban TikTok. Although, no, the issues we were talking about was with Facebook and Meta. So, wait, what? It's because, again, undercovering sort of the darker side, the Plutonian element of Pluto, like the government wanting all the information, and it wasn't getting the information from TikTok, so it was like, let's ban it. There was also total abortion bans occurring across the country, especially notably in Arizona, had a near total abortion ban, got overturned by Supreme Court, and then is being contested again. So that continues. So we watched a lot of rights be stripped away. So again, that Chiron moon with our individual womb, our individual ability to be ourselves and have our freedom of expression. Uranus is in Taurus with Jupiter, but I think a big part of the Aries eclipses and Libra eclipses was the freedom to be ourselves and the freedom to be ourselves within our communities without judgment. That would be the Libra portion of it. And I think there was this big moment of, no, you're the problem, you're the womb, you're the issue. You can't have that expression, you can't have those desires. And it was sort of this big standstill occurring where we're not quite getting where we want. And this being in the very middle of this eclipse, I do think there was a big part of like ourselves realizing the gaps that we had around the wombs or the fears, the pain points that we had around this big new beginning or this new individual pursuit that we've been starting in Aries with these eclipses and ourselves. Just because Mars is so close to Saturn, and that was just such a downer to say. So let's peek ahead a little bit at the Libra eclipse. So this eclipse is on October 2nd, and Kaleigh and I will do a much more thorough breakdown. But this is our last eclipse in Libra, and it's again a new moon here at 10 degrees of Libra, next to the South Node at 6 degrees Libra, with Mercury at 11. And, I'm not going to get too much into the general transits, but I do think, you as yourself want to reflect on the cycle a little bit. What did you start in April of 2023 that was really important for your sense of individualism and your sense of self? And what did you uncover then in October of 2023 that perhaps was a barrier or a side distraction or a little bit of a social conflict to that new desire or creation to expand your individual self? And then from there in 2024 of the spring, where did you find a good balance? Maybe you've been putting in the work and you did find a moment of like, yes, this is actually happening. I am actually creating this. I am actually moving forward and initiating this. And where can you celebrate that a little bit? And then equally, where did you also have still a wound, still a pain point, still a barrier or a gap between where you are at now and where you thought you would be in 2024 after a year after that first eclipse? And then you get to October of 2024, and this is kind of another more debilitated Libra or Venus. Venus is in Scorpio, so she has fallen or detriment. I like a detriment placement better than I like a fallen placement. So I do think this eclipse will feel a little bit better to that October one, but perhaps I do think it's going to speak heavily to that October 2023 eclipse. So a year ago, can you reflect back to a year ago and potentially what struggles did you uncover a year ago? And how do you feel about those potential or particular struggles a year later now? What have you addressed? What have you accepted? What have you really released and let go of, especially in that Libra area of your chart? As this is the last new moon, it's sort of a big acceptance, but also a big like, I did uncover, I did cross over so much. Like, I have a very, very, very large stellium in Libra. I have about 7 placements there. And so basically, over half my chart is ruled by planets in Libra. And in October of 2023, that was one of the hardest eclipses that I have ever felt. Just mentally, physically, manifesting wise. But it's September 19th right now, as I look about to this upcoming Libra eclipse, I can truly say that I am not where I was a year ago, and that struggle that I went through, that year-long struggle, was so important for strengthening my ability to stand strong, to show up. Like, I do think the sun being fallen in Libra is this whole eclipse cycle, including the Aries one, is strengthening our ability to show up, and it's showing us where do we lack balance or stability in terms of our individualism and our other. Are we too concerned about other people and pleasing them and wanting to make them happy? Or are we too selfish and independent and don't give enough respect to our community and our collective? Somewhere we're out of balance, and it's different for everybody, but somewhere you have been out of balance, and these eclipses are forcing you back into balance. For me, I was way too far on the people pleasing side, as I have that Libra stellium. I was way so far living a life for someone else, for other people, for my family that didn't fucking matter. And from there, I pulled so far back more into a stronger version of individualism, of standing up for myself, that's equally supporting the relationships and community and collective efforts. And then if we peek ahead to that final Aries eclipse that's happening in 2025, in March of 2025, March 29th, 2025, and this is our last one of this entire cycle. So this is one of the longest eclipse cycles that we deal with. It's literally 2 years. That's crazy. It's usually a year and a half. It's not that crazy, but it's a little longer. You know, this is a new moon again, an exalted sun at 9 degrees here in Aries. Chiron's at 22, further away. We always get Mercury. Mercury's retrograde at 0 degrees early, Aries, so that's fun. We are ruled by, guess what? Can you guess it? We are ruling this eclipse whole cycle, whole 2 freaking year cycle by a Mars in Cancer. Shit, man. And this Mars is an exact square to Chiron. So there's a big, I think this, there's a woo with it all. I think There will be a feeling of strong strengthening, but also realizing the work and the collective womb work that still has to be done. I think these eclipses starting something cardinal, starting this new avenue for who you are, how you want to show up. But we end with this womb. We end with Mars squaring Chiron. That's a womb. That means that, that's where the Pisces Virgo work comes in. That's where we started this, but now things have to change because something isn't working. Something is still a pain point. We're still not healing. We're still not collectively moving forward. And that's when all the work and effort is going to come in to the Saturn part of the North Node conjuncting Saturn. We're going to have to be more strict or more serious or more stronger in our boundaries and holding our boundaries for what we decided individually is an important thing for us to hold on to, and how individually we want to show up with our relationships and holding those boundaries strong. And that is going to be Pisces and Virgo, challenging your boundaries as well as reestablishing them from what you realized was a non-negotiable part of yourself from these Aries Libra eclipse. What have you learned from your individualness, from how you show up in your power that is non-negotiable, that you refuse to let go of because it supports your community, because it helps other people, because it also helps you? Now you know that there's some womb there, there's some sort of challenge there, some sort of frustration there. How can you change from that? And that's Virgo and Pisces, the change of the cardinal sign, the sort of getting things back into balance, putting places here so that the table stays flat, so that we feel stable again. Okay. I love eclipse cycles for timing. So I do challenge you to go back to the very beginning of April 2023 and reflect on what was so important for you to be starting at that time, to be stepping into, to be claiming as almost part of your identity or where you want to be putting your actions into. And what sort of challenges came up from that decision or that path in October 2023. And from there, what was that middle path, that middle placement, the middle point of tension in April and March and April of 2024? And then from there, how do you feel a year after coming into this next last Libra eclipse and having just started this Pisces eclipse, seeing what might have to change along the horizon? And then looking ahead to that last April or March eclipse in Aries, through what have you established as your main central point of self that you have to hold on to, but what's still a womb? And that womb is what you'll work through and heal and define and create space for in the Pisces Virgo eclipses. And you can do this, you can do the same thing that I just talked about. Go back to, Gemini, Sag, go back to Cancer, Capricorn was a big one. Go back to Taurus, Scorpio. Go back there and map out the eclipses there and see how you have grown in these cycles, and you could kind of see what I'm talking about in a way. I don't know. So this was I just wanted to give a little eclipse reflection podcast to give you a chance to reflect on your own chart and reflect on your cycles, because that's sort of where we're at in this in-between stage of cycles changing and growing and changing again. So, all right. Well, I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we are in the thick of eclipses. So I hope you just kind of let things ride as they may and go where they want to go, and not try to force anything at this period of time. If you want to follow us on the socials, we are on Instagram, TikTok mainly, and YouTube at Two Girls Talk Transits. And I am on Instagram at maddie.delray, as well. If you're interested in any consultations or anything else that we're doing, check me out at maddiedelray.com. Have a great rest of your week.